And we're live. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Product School Talk. I have an awesome guest for you today. Just before we begin, I want to make sure everybody can see and hear us. So we have a lot of people out there watching right now. It looks awesome. Great. So as many of you know, we teach product management courses, coding for managers and data for managers at our 6 campuses. And we also host weekly events on campus as well as these webinars. Today's guest is Yariv. He's the lead product manager over at Google Assistant in Zurich. Hi Yariv, how are you doing today?
Hi, great. Thank you very much for having me. Very excited to speak with people that are passionate about product.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you here with us. Can you talk a little bit more about your background and how you got into product management?
Sure. So I actually started my career as a software engineer, and I spent the first 10 years as an engineer and then engineering manager. Over time, as I was more about the higher level building of products and the strategic thinking and planning ahead, I found that I'm becoming more excited about what we want to achieve and how, rather than actually the engineering itself. So exactly 10 years ago, next week is my 10th anniversary at Google, I moved to Google Zurich and actually moved to become a full PM, product manager. Over the last 10 years, I moved quite a lot at Google and worked on a fairly varied areas. So I started working on proprietary infrastructure projects at Google. I then was amongst the very first PMs doing privacy at Google and security projects back in 2008. It was very interesting. I then led the emerging markets team at Google, where we built a very large set of products for the specific markets, payments, social, local. It was a very interesting exercise. After that, I thought that I can't be at Google without really understanding how ads work. So I worked on video ads on YouTube. And then finally, about 2 years ago, I was amongst the few PMs that started the Google Assistant project, which is extremely interesting. It's, in my opinion, one of the most exciting paradigm shifts that are happening now in the way people and machines interact, not just computers, but also devices. And that's what I've been doing the last 2 years.
Wow, awesome. It sounds like you've had a really interesting career path there. So congrats on your 10-year anniversary. Great. Well, I know you have a presentation prepared for us, so I'm going to give you a couple minutes to get that set up. And great. So guys, while he's setting that up to screen share, just so you know, after the presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A like we always do. And you can type in your questions right next to the YouTube video where you'll see the chat box. So it looks like you're ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready.
Awesome. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I was thinking about, you've asked me to what are my lessons learned from product management, 10 years as a product manager. I kind of got to this meta insight that actually product management is getting really, really hard over the years. Users are getting smarter and they have much more choice, and it's really hard actually to get their attention and time. Apps are becoming more powerful, and so on one hand, you can do so much more with what, phones have GPS, cameras, microphones, but you need to simplify it. It's not just phones and computers. There is many more form factors, wear devices, voice, AR, VR. And on the other hand, building blocks are being commoditized, machine learning, UI frameworks, cloud computing, and the range of change is really accelerating. So, I actually experienced what I thought each one of these revolutions as a one in a lifetime, building the rich GUI after a command line, and then web, and then mobile, and now AI and devices in assistant. So everything is moving so fast. And also PMs are getting much better than they were 10 years ago. So I was thinking about this fast rate of change, how product landscape is changing. So what kind of lessons can I bring that are not trivial on one hand and are a little bit more relevant for the long term? So the way I chose to approach it is, one, to try to bring a unique angle that I have coming from Google, which in a way is a unique company, and also keep it fairly small list. So I actually bring what I call 3+3 lessons learned. taking into account that building a product takes product thinking. So bringing 3 lessons that I find important on the product thinking and design. But at the end, also, it's about doing and working in a team and actually to get things done in a product being built by a lot of people. So also 3 lessons that are about how to work better in a team. And what I chose is not necessarily, the most basic lessons, because I'm sure you've heard these many times from many people, but actually things that I found surprising that I saw people failing on them quite often, even at Google, where it's a great company with super strong PMs. So basically, I want to bring my lessons that I've seen that sometimes are overlooked or not thought through as we build the product. And when I think about what's special about Google, what did I learn in Google that is unique and different than others, it was about thinking big, really big. And when people think about Google thinking big, they're always thinking, well, many times people are thinking about this moonshot thinking, 10x products, the self-driving cars, the balloons that are being, providing internet around the world, special futuristic health features. And I think that's very special, and I think it has its place. But actually, I wanted to focus in this presentation about the other side of thinking big. And this is, how do you get to build products that actually you can get 1 billion users or more on them in a sustained way year over year and grow them. And I think this is the real product management, the real challenge, the real magic that Google and a few other companies managed to do. And what does it take to build these products? And this is like my focus. So jumping right into the first part, which is about the part of designing the product and how do you get to such a scale. I think the first and most important thing that many times I've seen PMs forget is to own the problem, and specifically the problem and not the solution. A lot of PMs, once they are assigned to a project, or once they come with their idea, they are very focused on that specific idea, on that specific solution and getting it done. But actually, I think it's much more important to start with the problem and really, really understand and continuously focus on the problem. And what does that mean? The trivial side of it, that means, first make sure that you have a real problem. And if you want 1 billion users, that problem needs to be big and big enough for 1 billion people to care. But it goes beyond that. And I want to take a very familiar example that we are all familiar with, and this is Google Search. So when the founders of Google initially started, if you remember, back at the end of the 90s, they wanted to fix the problems they've seen in search engines. Basically, the results were not good enough. And they came with a fairly simple and elegant algorithm for providing much better results at the top. However, already from the beginning, they've never defined the problem as, okay, let's provide better results on search. The first thing they did is coin the mission and the problem statement for the company and for the product, which is organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So as a problem, it is already much, much bigger than only the solution that they originally started with. But it doesn't end there. So once they implemented that search engine and people started getting these better results, they discovered that it's only the beginning, that it's only the first step towards. Suddenly they discovered, by looking at logs and really looking at the problem and the users, that users are making a lot of spelling mistake, and because of spelling mistake, they are not getting results. Okay, so that is part of the problem. If you want to make the information accessible and useful, and you want to provide a good search, you need actually to solve that spelling. But that's not enough. People did not know how to form a query. And this is how features like suggest came out, that you start and the search engine suggests you, maybe this is what you want to think, and maybe this is what you want to ask. But that wasn't enough. People did not speak languages, so translate came in. But even there was not enough content on the data, so people were saying queries. We kind of understood what that query meant, but the content was not there to be answered. And this is where actually projects like Street View to make this, or maps to generate maps at the scale, or local findings and many other projects at Google came out. So still to make the world information accessible and useful, all starting from properly defining the problem and focusing on that and not just on the original solution. And then it went on again, discovered that people are not asking enough questions or don't have the patience to see the answers because the web is too slow. Stuff like Chrome as a browser that was focusing on speed came out. Google actually built submarine cables, satellites, these a very special 10x project on balloons that bring internet. Everything was about don't look on the solution. The initial solution that you started with is most probably only a small piece of the problem that you are trying to solve. Always look at the problem and make sure that you are continuing to solve it. So to me, this is the first lesson that I have learned. Always own the problem, not the solution. And many PMs miss on that and are overly obsessed with just owning the solution, which is very important, of course, with execution and design and everything. Own the problem and the entire problem. The next lesson, which is highly related to the previous point, is launching and iterating. And basically the question behind both of these that comes out is a question of innovation. How do you come with the ideas of what are the problems that you need to solve on these very large and complex scales, and what are the solutions that you should build? Where is that innovation coming from? Is it from brainstorming? Is it from genius PMs? And I think the answer is no. I think that it doesn't matter how creative you are, what's your capacity to generate ideas. You will never be able to compete with the insights, both about what's not working and what they want to work, but also what is working well, of thousands or millions of users that are using your product. So the basic idea is you better introduce that user feedback loop as early as possible as you can to the design process. Don't design the product in the solitude of your cubicle. Don't try to make it perfect and perfect and perfect before you launch it. Looking back at, again, taking Google search as an example, which was amazing when it launched, and it was amazing, 3 or 5 years later. But if today we will look at the Google search engine of 2002 or even 2005, which was quite a few years after it first started, it will look to us like a broken product. But at the time, it was game-changing. So it is very critical to make sure that you have good quality of the product so you can get meaningful product. But it definitely doesn't need to be comprehensive and perfect before you launch it out and start getting that user feedback. And especially in my teams, I always make sure that cut down on scope and features. So actually a minimum viable product can be fairly small and really like the real absolute features that bring new value, but make sure that these work in good quality. At Google, we are very obsessive in doing that. And actually, I think we came up with a good mechanism on how to do it from very early on in the process. So we started with this idea that you should eat your own dog food. So every product that we launch, we actually first use it ourselves for a while. But then we made the system a bit more robust. So we actually usually start very early on with what we call fish food. So this is the core team using the product from very early in the design, just sanity testing our assumptions, bug hunting, making sure that the thing really works. If you do not want to use the product, no one else will. So if you find that you build the product and you yourself are not using it from the beginning, something is wrong. Then the next stage is what we call team food. This is usually the broader group, not just your own team. Usually it will be between 100 people to a few thousand people. You will get here more objective, but still highly informed users. So here you will come and actually, it's very hard for a PM, just like a parent, to say his baby is ugly or her baby is ugly, but it's very easy for others. So we do this team food. And then once the product has the minimum viable set of features and a decent quality, we actually open it to what we call company dog food. So the entire Google, and Google is a big company, so 100,000 people are actually using your product. So this is pretty much proxy to real users. It highlights top issues such as privacy, usability, and so forth. And it's an excellent way to get bugs and feedbacks at scale in a fairly safe environment. For many startups and other companies, I guess that would be equivalent to early adopters or limited alpha. And then I think, again, also like don't build the spaceship for launching. Do an early launch, very early on, and get it out to real users. And one point to make here, all of this system is not worthwhile if you did not put all the necessary data collection and feedback mechanism already from early on. So you don't just let users use it, but you have a scalable way to collect their feedback and experiences. So let's assume, okay, you did all of that, you launched your product, and it is successful. And one of the insights that I had, and especially as I went to emerging markets, but also in almost any product that I've launched and worked on, is I noticed that there are like these well-executing teams that are very good across the functions who launched a successful product in a market, but for some reason, the vast majority of them fail when they try to scale to new markets. And going back to the first few slides, you cannot get to 1 billion users if you do not scale in more than one market. So why is it that these teams, and so many often, they fail? And again, some of the points that you will see here, I think are trivial or straightforward, but these are all real life examples that I have seen in excellent organizations and super strong teams. So why do teams? What are the common mistakes that we're seeing as you want to scale from your initial market? So I think three main points. One, I think many teams confuse what it takes and what you actually have the resources of launching versus scaling, and I'll get that into a second. I think another huge factor is underestimating non-technical factors. And this is especially in companies like Google, where leadership is mostly very technical. Even the product managers are very technical. So these are teams that invested 1 or 2 years building a scalable technology that can easily support users' growth and market expansion. And they feel at some point that they invested so much, we proved in one market, so it's very easy just to take that technology, put it in another market, and it will just work. But there are many other factors that they underestimate the impact of the success and therefore end up failing. And lastly, many times when we think about markets outside our main market, I see when I ask to see what is your plan for launching in market X, people show me a plan for launching. They do not have a plan for actually getting success and sustaining that success and growing that success. And again, you cannot get to 1 billion in a single launch. You need to be able to grow. So just a point on launching versus scaling. Usually most products when they launch, it's like, hey, this is our most critical market. It's like super strategic. The ROI is high. And it doesn't matter, right? Like, startups and company others, we just pour resources and pour time into it in order to make that first launch. And the people that are working on it are like the core people, the best people. These are like, the product managers that came with the ideas, the engineers. All the passion, dedication, and expertise of that core team is focused on that market. They speak the language, they understand it, they find the bugs themselves, they fix quickly, they experience the product. But as you scale to other markets, the ROI of every other market usually is a bit lower. As a result, actually, you're operating under lower budgets and operational constraints, and you're actually relying on execution of some other team, and only a minority or a small percentage of the core team can actually invest in that. And a lot of teams just don't think about that in the first planning phase, that actually it's very different, that scaling is less valuable in a way. There will be less ROI with many less resources. And that's like, just one thing to remember. And like I said, the other part is someone needs to take care of a lot of factors that have nothing to do with product and technology. Positioning, marketing, do you have a quality process? Do you have a local leadership that can hire and lead and understand the stuff in the marketing? Operations, strategic partnership. Basically, there are many other factors that usually only after the fact you handle it as fires go up. And the biggest cost for failing in the market, it's not just that you fail and you hurt your brand. This kind of things tend to spill over in today's world that everything is connected. But the biggest fine that I've seen, the biggest tax, is this takes actually leadership attention and management cycles. So actually failing in a few smaller markets has a much higher price on the entire general management. So just to summarize before I go to the next three things, which are more about building product as a team, make sure you own the problem, you understand the problem, and you focus on the problem, not on the solution, because the solution usually is a small piece that you need to begin with, but you need to grow on. Launch and iterate, get that feedback very early on and respond to it and have the tools to really understand and react to what you get. And as you succeeded in one market and scale, really understand what does it mean to be scaled. Don't make success your enemy. And hopefully you're on the right track to building a 1 billion users product. But the other part of product management, I think there are a lot of what I call people with product management PhD, that they understand everything that I said, and they know exactly what needs to be done and how it should be done, but doing it is really hard. At the end, product management is building, is really doing, and getting things done. And many teams that have great ideas and plans fail on the execution. And there is endless lessons learned in that area. So, but again, I limited myself to 3, and I tried to come up with 3 that are not heard that often, but are seen failing quite a lot. So the first thing that I noticed with the product managers do wrong is ask, don't tell. So many product managements tend to think that their role is to provide the product strategy, the insight, the plan, and give it to the team so the team can execute effectively. But when you tell or you guide or you answer, you close the discussion. You're actually narrowing the opportunities. When you're asking, you're opening it. And I see it a lot in product reviews. When a product management starts this kind of discussions, telling everyone, hey, these are the key features that we want to do, these are the success metrics, this is our strategy, maybe, there is the chance that, he thought about all the opportunities, but basically now he nailed everything, and now it's just about the how and execution. But if you're facilitating a constructive discussion and asking the team, hey, and the key stakeholders, what should we do? What's the rationale? What are the alternatives that we can do it? Actually, many more ideas and much better solutions tend to come up. But of course, it's always slightly more complicated than that. And I want to highlight a few things about asking. I think it matters, what do you ask? You can ask endless questions. I think, focus on asking about assumptions, analysis, conclusions, goals, neglected direction. I think that one of the big powers of a product manager is to force rethinking and reevaluation of the current direction. Focus is very important. And, once you're on a direction, especially, execution is key. But a lot of companies, the mistake was that they never actually rethought and evaluated the missed changes in the market or competition. Then another point here is it matters who you ask. Many times in discussions, you see people talking, but it's not clear that the best ideas generally come from the people who tend to talk, to the most outspoken people. So you as a product management manager really need to find a way to get the people that are really experts in the field to voice their opinion. Asking them is one side, but giving them roles or, one-on-ones before or other techniques to make sure that you really hear everyone, and especially the domain experts. Another thing that I've also seen is the difference between genuinely asking in an effort to understand the point versus questioning stuff. And I'm a strong believer that asking is a much better way to get into the points, because when you really drill down to understand what people are trying to say, what they're thinking, or what are the directions, usually errors and issues naturally surface. You don't need to focus on these. Really ask to understand. Don't try to question the assumption. Actually, that again closes the discussion. And then lastly, it matters when you ask. Yeah, there is a great value in driving this discussion, but there is a time to stop asking and make decisions. And when your team cannot reach a satisfying decision on their own, you need to make that decision. Don't drag that. Make very clear that this decision has been made, and document that and share that decision with the rest of the team. So a long point, but I think it's critical actually, again, to get that innovation going and to get the entire team to be motivated. The other thing is, as a product manager, many times people are saying that we're like the grease in the wheel that gets the wagon moving, and we need to make sure whatever is the problem in getting the team going to build the product, it's your role to jump in and fix it. But many times I've seen product managers kind of pushing on a string instead of removing the obstacle. When I see that a team or a team member is constantly missing on milestones or goals or quality metrics of a certain project, the instinct is to press and nag in an attempt to force progress. And sometimes you even don't do it directly, but just requesting frequent updates or reviews, basically, you're pushing and trying to force that progress. My assumption is that people on my team are not lazy or stupid. If that's your problem, then there is a better lesson learned, that is, hire the right people. But I assume someone has mentioned it before me. So instead of pushing and nagging, really try to identify the root cause and to remove obstacles. And funny enough, many times I noticed that what seemed to be execution or strategy problem, or some big, hairy, unclear issue that causing the team to miss on stuff, actually comes from two fairly simple root causes that can be easily fixed, especially for new projects, where goals and milestones are set at the beginning before we really understand the problem, the domain, and the solution. And many times, because people are ambitious and people want to set audacious goals, they set some crazy end of year or end of quarter milestones and goals. Sometimes these are set by management or even less informed about the problem. And then the team seems to be failing, but actually they're doing really well, but the initial goal was completely wrong. So again, I think the product manager goal is also to look like, just like you own the problem, is our goal realistic? Is it the correct one? Are we executing towards the right thing? And you have actually the power to fix that and have more realistic and relevant plans. Having an audacious goal with a plan that doesn't match, is pretty much worthless. The other thing, which is again, very common and seems to be sometimes to be discussed as a different problem, is the issue that teams are oversubscribed, ending up in delivering mediocre quality across a large set of the features or areas. And people feel that saying no or raising their head that they're oversubscribed is kind of failure, and it is your goal to recognize this. So these are two issues, but again, these are things that I've seen over and over again happening, that then gets the team frustrated and just doing the wrong decisions, trying to fix a problem that is not there. Lastly, last lesson learned that I've seen in many teams is, if it's important for you, repeat it. And you might think that you've said stuff a million times already, and you feel that you're maybe even talking in buzzwords. You might think that everybody knows it by heart, but now I'm telling you, think again, because you will be surprised. Go and ask people about stuff that you've said. You'll be surprised how much they don't know. And this is especially important when it comes to the more strategic topics, which are not day-to-day. And this is not surprising, because people are bombarded these days with infinite email and information, hundreds of emails every day. It's just hard to fish out what's important yet non-urgent. And repetition is an excellent signal for your team to know, hey, this is important. This is something you should pay attention. And these are just some questions that, I've noticed that when I ask people on the team and even leadership, I get very different answers, which means I did not repeat enough times these questions. Like, why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? Going back to the problem. What is our strategic goals? What is the single most important metric for us? What is next? And it's super important that people actually know that. It's not just for them to repeat it like parrots, but this is actually what drives you in the right direction. And what you miss on, if you miss on it, you just diverge in completely wrong directions. And many people on your team, maybe you're not aware, are making dozens and hundreds of decisions, small decisions every day. Your engineers, your lawyers, your PR, your marketing, other PMs on the team, that are based on what they assume about these big questions. So always make sure repeat it, like, almost every meeting, once a month, repeat it in email and other ways, so people really understand the bigger picture, the problem that we're solving, the strategy that we're taking, and any big assumption. People do not remember that, and it's critical for you. In the spirit of, if it's important for you, repeat it, I will repeat just once more again what I find the 3+3 big lessons that I found not to be the exclusive thing, but critical in a team that wants to build these products that can scale globally, reach billions of users, and sustain success. Own the problem. Make sure you have a good problem, a big problem, a hard problem, and constantly focus on the problem and think about it, and then involve your users. You're your first user, your team is your users, but as early as possible, real users in your innovation process. Launch and iterate and iterate and iterate, get feedback, get data, and constantly release new stuff very early. Nail it before you scale it. Make sure you nailed it. Make sure you understand what is scaling takes. Very carefully as you move into that step, have a checklist of what it takes. I provided here, some examples. And do that carefully, or it can ruin you even in your core market. As you work with your team, don't assume you know all the answers. Asking the right questions at the right time is critical, and you will get many more heads instead of just legs and hands. At the end, make decisions. Don't leave them with the questions. You are responsible for making decisions. You made decisions and you're executing. Try to understand the obstacles. Don't push on strings. Don't nag. Don't just force people doing stuff. Try to understand what is the root cause, what is really happening here, and sometimes it's surprisingly trivial. And at the end, problem, plans, strategy, all these things that are not part of the day-to-day execution, repeat it again and again and again, because you want your team to work for you, but they need to share your vision. You need to make sure that you're sharing the assumptions and the goals in order for that to work well for you. Thank you. I hope that was somewhat helpful and will make you think somewhat about it. I'm very excited about using these guidelines as I build products, and happy now to have a more open conversation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Yari, for that really thorough presentation. It was really good. We had quite a few questions coming in while you were presenting, so I'm going to go ahead and pull just a couple. We have about 5-6 minutes for questions, so let's see here. We had one from VKU. How do you measure product market fit at Google?
So I think, when you ask a question at Google, Google is a very distributed and not always organized entity. I can tell you in the areas that we, I think, one, again, going back to the problem, right, and really asking yourself first, what am I trying to solve? And then what are the critical pieces in order to, one, for the market to be, for the problem to exist in the market? Is it a big problem in the market? So for example, Waze. I assume they want people that are driving in their own cars. If you're going to a market that is giant like India, but people are either not driving cars, or if they do drive, they're rich enough to have a driver, maybe the problem is not as big, although you would think it's a huge market. You really want to understand the problem, what are the parameters. Then the other thing is to set yourself for success, especially in the first few markets, and really understand what do you need, right? And setting for success is, again, going to emerging markets. If you have a product that relies on high-end devices and fast connectivity, then make sure that you're going to this market. If you're assuming some demographics, whether it's education or money or age, make sure it applies for the market. If you're assuming some kind of regulatory landscape. So I think it's really analyzing is how big the problem is in the market, what are the attributes of the problem, and then what sets me for success, analyzing that and really going carefully through this and basing it on data. So I did not say it, but data, not opinion, is would be my seventh thing.
Right. No, absolutely. Awesome. Our next question comes from, let's see, Manav. How can you negotiate with leadership when leadership insists on launching MVP in other markets versus scaling an initial market?
Again, right? So data versus opinions. This is the general direction. I would come and say, hey, these are the resources. First, I would start and check what are the resources required. Am I set for success? And I would not say just for launching. I would make the point, hey, I can launch it. Maybe, launching everywhere is not that hard usually. Usually it is possible to launch. But what does it make to sustain, and what does it cost to grow and be successful? What are the functions that we needed in order to do it in the initial market? And do we have these functions in the capacity required in order to do it in that market? Sometimes they would say, hey, it's like a land grab and we'll do it and it's fine. And at the beginning, it will get worse before it gets better. That happens. Although then a company like Google maybe can spend that money and lose for a while. If I was a smaller company or with a smaller profit margins, I'd be careful. But I would usually, again, try to make it very clear, hey guys, I'm fine to do it, but here's what it takes, here is what I have, and it's a negative result.
Right, that's really smart. Too awesome. So we had another one here. Let's see. What considerations do you keep in mind during launch stage to set the product up for success for scale out stage?
So I think one question is, do I have a sustained, the first thing I ask, do I have a sustained product success? So basically, when I look at my key market, did I actually manage to have a successful product that I understand why it's successful and how it works? Right? Because many times maybe you're paying marketing, or maybe it's only a small portion, but that small portion seems large for whatever reason. Can I say the thing is healthy and growing, and I understand why it's healthy and growing? So this is the first thing I ask. Then do I have actually quality metrics set in place that I can actually measure how am I doing and can I react quickly? These are the very first elements. Then I ask, what do I need to put it in place? Did I need to do regulatory work? Did I need BD? Did I need partners? Did I need local data? Did I need marketing? So these kind of pieces, what did I need to get it, even launched? And then what did I need to continue its success? Then lastly, I ask, okay, what kind of functions do I need on the ground? Do I need operations? Do I need financial, whatever? And do I have the people? In some markets, it's easy to hire. Some other markets, it's extremely hard, and it will take 2 years, and you need some plan without distracting the core team, because otherwise you invest in smaller markets and waste time and energy.
Oh. Awesome. Let's see, we'll have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions here. So I'll take these last 2. So this one's from Richard. What do you think is key as a product manager to be successful in a new project?
So I think there are 2 pieces to it. One, you need to be creative, right? When you start from zero, thinking out of the box and being creative and being able to take these very unstructured, vague, fuzzy thinking and articulating them into a concrete product and plan is ability that usually if you take an existing product, you have the users and you have some feedback that helps you. Here, like you're lacking that feedback loop that I was talking about. The other thing, people are always coming to me, especially now in assistant, hey, Yariv, I want to work on this shiny new thing. And I tell them, the first week, the shiny new thing is not shiny. It's faster, more. It's like so many times wrong. So you need to have endurance, ability to execute, know how to handle failures. And it's walking up a greasy mountain on a December night with a few hurricanes behind you and in front of you.
Yeah, that's definitely a good analogy. Cool. So this is going to be our last question today. So we have Nick from Los Angeles. Hi, Nick. What's your best piece of advice for people who are trying to get into product management, or what's the strongest skill that someone should have?
I think one is understand products. So like people that before they come to a product interview, I tell them, take 20 products that are actually, 6 or 7 types. So there is some different versions of the same product from different companies. Use them and really try to understand what were the assumptions that they made. What are they actually good decisions? What are some bad decisions? Why do you think they made them? What is different between the different things? Like as a user, really try to get the insight into really understand the product as a machine. What do I like? Is latency here good or bad? How important is it? Is it too much functionality, not enough functionality, simple and so forth. So I think that really understanding product is a key skill, and the way to do it really is download, use, and think about it. And after you do that for a while, like a few weeks, actually, when people talk to you about products and you think, these things come more naturally. And then the second thing is getting things done. Like I said, there are many product PhDs out there that at the end, when you are on that greasy mountain with the hurricanes, you just can't do it. And it's hard to build product. Competition is hard. Everything that is trivial was done in 2002.
No, that's very true. We actually always tell our students as well too, whenever you want to become a product manager, you do have to build something. So great. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you so much for your presentation and taking the time to answer a couple questions. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was fun.
Awesome. And cool. And thanks again for being here, everyone. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to get updates on our new videos from events or upcoming webinars. And as you guys know, we just released the product book, and I have a copy here, so you can get yours on Amazon. Cool. Well, we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye.